New Florida Majority, we have a C3, a C4, and a PAC, and we're an independent political organization building power that centers Black and Brown communities towards racial equity, gender justice, climate action. And we're energizing a new majority electorate to really bring a new Florida into being. And we believe in unleashing the talent of people of color, of women of color across the state, and that will drive the transformational change that we need so that all of our families can thrive. Our top priorities are the Voter Rights Restoration Ballot Initiative, Amendment 4. Last year, in deep partnership with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition and the leadership of directly impacted folks, and a coalition of organizations across the state in this statewide alignment group, we collected over 1 million signatures to put voter rights restoration on the ballot. And this year we're committed to knocking on doors and talking to people and making sure that we win in November, and so that people with a felony conviction who have been systematically disenfranchised as a legacy of Jim Crow are able to fully participate in democracy. I think the other kind of big area of work that New FM has really been leading into is climate action, and really looking at, here in Florida, we're ground zero for a lot of the impacts of climate change on the United States. And we know that communities of color and poor communities are going to be hit worst. And so really making sure that we're kind of engaging folks in developing the bold solutions that we need to protect our families. We know that we need to build long-term power to gain governance, right? At the city level, at the county level, at the state level, and ultimately to transform the country. Part of the work is developing a long-term vision, ideology, and plan to progressive governance at the city, county, and state level. And then, what are the campaigns that get us there, and the kind of rigorous practice and assessment that we need to be doing together. So the statewide alignment group is a collaboration between New Florida Majority, Dream Defenders, the Florida Immigrant Coalition, SCIU, Faith in Florida, Organized Florida, and Central Florida Jobs with Justice. And this is a collaboration to break the back of Jim Crow and attain non-patriarchal governance that will transform Florida and the nation. And well, I think the kind of changes that we're determined to make really requires shifting who holds power and resources in our movements. And it really necessitates fostering collaboration in the field that builds trust and erodes some of the obstacles to long-term shared visioning, planning, division of labor, and creates the real space for us to be honest about where we are, where we need to go, and what it's going to take for us to get there. And I think here in Florida, we were seeing election cycle after election cycle, year after year, millions of dollars getting poured into the state and nothing left behind. It all kind of dissipating and disappearing after election day, in spite of organizations being committed to be in communities year round. And in a state like Florida, really a deep recognition that none of us are going to be able to do it alone. And so what does it look like to get a set of organizations that are committed to racial justice and long-term and a long-term commitment to Florida to come together to break the back of Jim Crow and develop a 10-year plan to non-patriarchal governing power. And you know, and that commitment that like we're not going to disappear the day after election day, like we'll be deep in communities like 2 weeks after, the year after, and the year after that, and disrupting, you know, a lot of people's disengagement in electoral politics is because it's become so transactional, and people can see right through that. Like, you know, people want to be like respected and heard, and not just like used by a politician or by an organization in the service of a particular political party.
What SWAG centers on are these population centers, right? And recognizing that true political power can only be achieved if you're really building a coalition between these major swaths of community, not only just in terms of racial and ethnic makeup, but spending power. You know, the ability for those dollars to mobilize. All of us, you know, as collective organizations, are also trying to build our membership bases as a result, right? Because we want those folks in those communities to see what collective power looks like, and know that if I'm in Orlando, that I can trust that the folks doing the work down in Miami, or the folks doing the work up in Jacksonville, or the folks doing the work in Tampa are all on the same page, and that we're trying to move the state forward and move our issues forward responsibly. That it all can't be done in one space, right? I think what all of us individually kind of learned is that we were doing our work in these pockets, but until Miami, Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale are all on the same page, we're kind of going to be stuck in the mud, spinning our wheels. And so that's why the SWAG group and the collective is so important. And